Now that we've built our singleton database class, we're going to move on to being able to query, fetch results and things like that. So now we know that we've established a connection, we can go ahead and just create a generic query method. And basically what this is going to allow us to do is either publicly query it. So from our index.php, we could do something like query and then enter a query in here, say select username from users. So we can either do this, or we can call it from within inside of our class from other methods. So to define our method, we're just going to say public function query, and this is going to take two arguments. The first one is going to be the query string. The second is going to be an array of parameters that we might want to include as sort of binded values in PDO. Now what this allows us to do is firstly prepare the SQL, so prepare the string that we pass through. Instead of saying things like select username from users where username equals Alex, for example. Oh no, sorry, that will be, let's just put some double quotes here. So instead of doing something like that, what we can do is we can say question mark, and then we can create an array here and basically just say we can say Alex. So what this will do is it will replace each one of these items in the array. So Billy, for example, and then we could say or username equals like this. So this would basically translate to Alex here and Billy here. So this is the kind of thing we want to do because we want to provide the ability to give more security to these queries, and we'll be whether we want to do a raw query like this or whether we're including the functionality inside of our class, then we want this functionality. So params is going to be an empty array, which we can use to check if whether anything's actually been defined. So the first thing to do here is reset the error back to false, because remember we can perform multiple queries one after another, and it's likely that we're going to want to do that. For example, we might want to get a list of queries and then on the same page retrieve a query just for a specific user. So we want to always reset the error back to false so that we know we're not returning an error for a previous query. So the next thing to do is basically just check if the query has been prepared properly. So we're sort of now saying to PDO, prepare this query. If this query does, is sort of prepared successfully, then we're going to bind our parameters if they exist. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and execute the query, return the results as an object, and then update the row count in our query in our class up here. So the count of results, and then set the results. So in here we say if this underscore query. Well, now what we're doing is we're performing an assignment to a variable and also checking this within an if statement anyway. So this PDO prepare SQL. So if that's successful, I'm just going to echo out success. So let's go ahead and just take a look at this. Let's refresh. It says success. Let's actually get rid of the connected message that we included in the last part, and let's go ahead and just refresh. So we've got a success here. Now what happens if we change the code to something completely different? So for example, the users table doesn't exist with a Z. So in this case, we still get a successful prepare because we've prepared this. We basically prepared this successfully. I think if we were to add something like just A in here, this probably won't prepare successfully. Oh, in fact, it will. Never mind. So when we come to executing, we'll perform a similar check as well. So we'll check if this is actually executed properly, and in that case, it wouldn't have because it's not a successful query. So if the prepare method is of the PDO object has gone to plan, what we then want to do is we want to check if the parameters exist. So we want to check if we actually need to bind anything. So let's create an if statement here and say if count params, just checking if anything has been added to this array. We then want to list through them, so for each params as param. Now what do we want to do? Well, we want to say this query, remember we've stored the query, and we want to bind the value of the position to this value. Now this here is a position, and this is the parameter we want to bind. Now how do we determine the position that we're currently in? Well, we can either use an index here, or we can just set a counter. So just for the sake of simplicity and making this look a little bit easier, I'm just going to set x to 1 up here, and then I'm going to increment x for each loop, and this is then going to represent x. So the first loop, this will be 1. So we say we want to bind the value at 1. So for example, so this is at value 1. We want to bind the value at 1 to the parameter that we've defined. And in that case, that would be Alex. If we had a second one, we could do something like Billy. So we're assigning the value Alex to the first question mark, basically. So now that we've done that, we want to go ahead and execute the query anyway, regardless of whether there's a count of parameters or not, because if there aren't any parameters, we still want to execute the query. So we're going to say if this query execute. So remember, we've stored the query and then we're executing it. If that's the case, then we have a success or not. So this is the actual success of whether the query has been successfully executed rather than prepared. So in this case, it is a success. If we were to then go ahead and change this, like I showed in the last example, to users with a Z, the success message doesn't appear because the users table with a Z obviously doesn't exist. So now that we've done that, we've basically built the functionality to query a database securely by binding parameters and removing the possibility for SQL injections. This is functionality native to PDO. We've just abstracted it to make it a bit easier for us to work with. So in this case, if the query has executed successfully, what do we want to do? Well, we want to store the result set. So we just say this results equals this query. Remember, we've stored the query here. Fetch all, so that's a method of PDO, and we want to define or say that we want to fetch the object of results. And this is important because we're working with object-oriented programming. It doesn't make sense to return an array. We want to work with an object. So we want the values in the columns of our table to represent as an object. We also want to update the count of results that we get back, and that's basically just as simple as saying this query row count. That's a method on PDO as well. So otherwise, we want to go ahead and set the fact that there's been an error. So this error equals true. Now we've not actually got a way to define whether this query has successfully executed or not. So we're going to go ahead and create a public function called error. And all we're going to basically do here is just return this error. So that will by default return false. If there has been an error though, this method will return true. So what we can now do is start to get into a bit more useful functionality and say user equals, and then we want to say if user error echo no user, otherwise echo okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. We should then get an let's just take a look here. Of course. So we've chained on this error method, but we haven't actually returned the object within the query method to allow the chaining to happen. So we want to say return this. Now basically all that's going to do is return the current object we're working with, and therefore allow us to chain on this error method here. So when we refresh now, it says okay. If we were to go and modify the query as we have done before to say users with a Z, we then get the no user error. So we now basically have the ability to query, check whether there's an error or not, and well, that's it really. That's brilliant what we need. So what we're now going to do is start to look at how we can define, this is sort of not strictly required, but it makes it a lot easier to delete things quicker, get things quicker, and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to create a method called action, and this is going to allow us to perform a specific action. So it will be something like select or delete, and we're going to define a table, and then we're going to define a specific field with a specific value. So this can be, does it equal, is it greater than? So what we can then do is start to change this functionality, and we could say something like the database we want to get, and we've already looked at this already. We've already looked at how this might work. So we want to get from the users table where username is equal to Alex. So we want to define functionality like this, and the reason being is that you can clearly see it makes it a lot easier than performing a raw query on the database, passing in the values that you want to bind. So this just abstracts things even more, so we don't even have to bother writing queries, and this speeds up workflow massively. It just allows you to, define define what you want quicker, basically. So let's go ahead and start writing this function. We're going to call it action because it's an action that we're performing on a database. And what we want to define is the action, the table, and the array, which is basically going to be the where clause in the query. Now, what we're also going to do is we're going to set a public function get, and we're also going to set a public function delete. So we're going to basically build in the ability to get and delete data. We'll look at updating data a bit later. That will be a slightly different. So in terms of getting, we want to get from a table, and we want to say where we want to do things, or how we want to get things in based on field names. And the same for delete as well. We want to delete from a table where something equals something. So if we want to delete the user Alex, we would say, instead of get, we'd say delete from users where username is equal to Alex. So for the action then, we want to check if the count of where that's passed in is equal to 3. Because we need a field, an operator, so like equals, greater than, and we need a value as well. So field, operator, value. So here we want to say operators equals, and we're going to define a list of operators that we're going to allow, because we don't want just things willy-nilly being passed in. So we're going to say equals, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and yeah, that's it. So this can obviously be extended, and you can update this for your own use, but for now we're going to do that. Now we want to set 3 variables. I'm just going to put them to an empty string for now so we can duplicate these down. So we're going to have a field, an operator, and a value. All we need to do now is just extract this data from our where array. We know that it equals 3, so we know that we've got 3 different elements to this array. So we're going to say where 0, where 1, and where 2, and that's it. So we now know the field, the operator, and the value. Now we want to check whether the operator is inside of the array that we've defined up here, this operators array. So we're just going to use the inArray function that PHP gives to us kindly, and we want to say if the operator is inside the operators array. If it is, then we can go ahead and construct our query, and then we can make use of the query method that we've already built. So let's go ahead and do that. So SQL equals, and we're going to create a string. So we want to basically let's just build this up as we would perhaps normally. So we're going to say select field. Oh no, sorry, select from. So it'll probably be something like select star from users where username equals Alex. Now, of course, we're not going to keep this in here. It would be pointless because we'd only ever be able to select like this. This, however, is going to be the actual operator, the action that we've defined here. So this action here will just say action from, we already know that we have defined a field where from table where field operator and then value. Well, in this case, we're going to put a question mark. And the reason we're going to put a question mark is because when we do our query, we can just bind that value on. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's just see how this might work. If action is select star, table is users, and where has 3 elements, username equals Alex, then we'll say select star from users where username equals question mark. What we then want to do is use our query to perform a query, a query method to perform a query, sorry. So we want to say if SQL, and then we want to bind on the value. So the value here will be bound to this, the query will be run here, and this question mark will be replaced with the value that we pass in here. So we're basically making use of everything in tangent. So everything is sort of, separate, but we can use it in harmony together. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of messing around, we're going to say if not this query error. So we're going to say if there's not an error, return this. Now, otherwise, outside of everything, we just want to return false, like that. That's all we need to do. So once the query has successfully run, we want to return the current object we're in, because later on we're going to create a method that allows us to return the result set. So in this case, we're not returning any results or anything like that. But all we're doing is just saying no user or okay, for example. So now that what we want to do is we'll go ahead and build our get and delete methods. Now these are extremely easy because all these are going to do is make use of this action here. In actual fact, this could probably be private because there's no real need to use this outside of our database. If you want to, that's fine. So for get, what do we need to do? Well, if you're a little confused, this might clear things up for you. We're using the get here as an example, and we're passing in a table, and we're passing in an array of things that we want to search or get for in a certain pattern. So where the username equals Alex. In this case, all we're going to do is return. Now we're returning because this returns this. Therefore, when we return this action, now we need to define the action. In this case, it's going to be select star. We always want to just grab every field that we require because we're going to assume here that we just want everything from that user's table just to basically save time. And so we don't have to specifically define which fields we want. Some people will say, oh, you shouldn't select everything if you don't need it. But in this case, it's just going to make it a lot easier because we won't have to constantly define what we need to return. So in that case, we're going to say select star. We want to select it from the table that we've defined here. So we're going to select star from users, which will be this. And then we want to just pass in this array. So what's going to happen, let's just run through this in sort of order in case it's got a little bit confusing. We're using the get method and saying we want to get from users where username equals Alex. We call the get method. We say table and where, so we say select star table where. We're calling action, so this will pass select star to here, this will pass table to here, and this where array to here. And then inside of here, we can start to use that data as we've already explained. So essentially, this is just really a shortcut to making this a little bit easier to use rather than saying action each time. So in that case, we're just, in fact, let's set this to public anyway. We might want to use it outside. So we're saying public function get. Now, you'll probably already guess the same, it will be the same for delete, but we're just here saying delete, and that's it. So now when we run get here, let's go ahead and have a look. Refresh. Okay. So we now know that we have a set of results from this get method because that's called action, which is called query, which has then set the results up here to whatever the result set is. So if we were to go ahead and change this to Billy, there is no user called Billy in the table at the moment, so this is going to return, oh, it's returned okay. Let's just have a look here. Okay, of course. This basically means that our query has been a success. It doesn't mean that we actually have this set of results back. So once we start to use our count method, we'll be able to check if this has actually returned anything or not. So let's go ahead and just build our count method very quickly. This is extremely easy. So public function count. Now in this case, this is just going to be, we're going to use this here instead. So count, we'll just say if no count, and all this is going to do is, it's very, very similar to error, is return this count, and that's it. So now when we refresh, we get no user because we're looking for a user called Billy that doesn't exist in our database. But if we were to say Alex, then we will get an OK message. Oh, sorry, we haven't even created anything in our database. So let's go ahead and quickly do that now. We'll just put some sort of dummy value in. This is a plain text password, but eventually it will of course be a hash password, and we won't include a salt yet, but we'll be generating all that at some point later on. Very exciting. So we'll just say I joined today, and I'm group 1, for example. So now we get the OK message back, whereas let's flip that back over to it being Billy, and that should return us with no user. So we now have the ability to quickly get things for our database. We could also, of course, pass in dates here. So we could say joined is greater than a certain date. The flexibility of this now is brilliant because we have the ability to get things where we need them and everything like that. It just makes things a hell of a lot easier to work with. So that's it for grabbing data from our database. We've incorporated these 2 methods. We could add more if we wanted to. We're of course only going to be including the functionality that we need in our actual login and register application. But by doing this and keeping things in very small, relatively small methods, we can actually make use of things, make shortcuts to things, and it makes actually developing like this a lot nicer.